All right, so welcome to Branch again. I'm Jared. I'm one of the pastors here. We are in the middle of our Faith Over Fear series. We've been looking at the life of a man named Abraham and his relationship with God. This story is told in Genesis, the first book of the Bible. And in this story, we've been seeing week after week, God continues to pursue Abraham, to make good promises to him, and Abe continues to struggle with fears and doubts and these promises, while he also seeks and learns more and more to put his faith and trust in God. Abe's got a lot of problems. He doesn't have a homeland. He's been trusting God to this land that God's going to show him. He and his wife Sarah are both way beyond childbearing age, and yet God has promised him an ancestor and an heir and a land, and that his children will one day be as numerous as the sands, as the stars in the sky. So God keeps making these huge promises, and Abe keeps trusting and also messing up. These stories have been showing us pictures of how faithful and trustworthy God is, and they've also been showing us what it looks like for us to put our faith in a trustworthy God. And we're looking at this for a simple reason. I mean, for me personally, I believe about putting our faith in God, in the God that we see, the God that we encounter in these stories, in this life of Abraham and throughout the whole Bible. This God, putting our faith in him, will transform our lives and help us overcome our fears. I believe we need someone bigger than ourselves in our lives. And this God is someone bigger than ourselves that we meet in these stories. And I believe that we can trust this God. So today's story is a big one. It's a messy one. Today's story deals with trusting God with matters of justice and mercy. Is God just? Is he merciful? Is he both? How does all of that work out? This is kind of hard stuff, right? Things don't look all that just in our world sometimes. People don't seem all that just. Or people don't seem all that merciful sometimes in our lives. Some of you hear justice and you say, yes, we need more justice in the world. Some of you hear the word justice and you think of that person who's a stickler for the rules that bothers you all the time. Like, can't you let up? Can't you show some mercy? Can't you give some slack? We wrestle with this ourselves. Are we just people? Are we merciful people? Do we prefer one or the other? It might be depending on what time of day it is or how much sleep we got. Some people hear mercy and they say, yes, we need merciful people. Some people hear mercy and they think weak. They think, how could this world ever survive if everyone was merciful? If every time you got pulled over by the cops for speeding, you knew you were going to get mercy, how would you drive? You'd probably go a lot faster. And society would be in a lot of trouble if all we ever got was mercy. But again, it might depend on your situation. For me, I'm going to tell you a story about the first time that I remember really feeling the push and pull of justice and mercy. When I was in first grade, I was in gym class. We were playing floor hockey. My team was dominating. We were up 6-0. And while I was on the bench, the gym teacher, Mr. Napo, he started cheating for the other team. It was a perversion of justice. I was not happy. He started playing for the other team, scoring goals for them. They tied the game up. Then we were losing. I was furious. I was really upset. I thought, this isn't fair. When he called me back in to play the game, I refused. I said, you're cheating. This isn't fair. I'm not playing. Mr. Napo said, you refuse to play? Go to my office. So I got kicked into his office. And I calmly got up. I walked into his office. I felt, I'm doing what's right. This is unjust. I'm taking a stand. I get to the office. I sit there. And then a wave of anxiety washes over me. You ever gotten sent to the principal's office or anyone? Am I the only one? Has anyone got in trouble in school ever? Thank you. All right. That was the first time I got in trouble. And I get to the office and I'm anxious, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there like, what are you doing? You're not in charge of gym class. You're not an adult. You're 6 years old. What are you doing? So I'm sitting there in the office. Gym class is over. Mr. Napo comes in at the end of the class. He pulls out this giant ledger teacher book. I don't know if you guys still have those or it's all on computers now. Pulls out this giant ledger book. Pulls out this giant, like expensive looking teacher's pen. And he starts writing. And he's speaking while he's writing. Okay, let's see what we have here. Mr. Jared Murray, insubordinate. He refused a direct order from his teacher. Jared refused to participate in gym class, which is a required class mandated by the state of New Jersey and the President of the United States. 2 8th grade girls stop by the office, and they see me crying. Mr. Napple, what are you doing to this poor kid? Don't feel bad for him. He refused to play gym. At that moment, I no longer cared about justice. I really, 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 really just wanted mercy. Right? Things change depending on your perspective. I got home at the end of the day, terrified, right? You ever terrified that you got in trouble and someone's going to call your parents? So I got home at the end of the day, terrified that my parents were going to be called, hoping they would be merciful to me after I got in trouble. So I got home, talked to them, and once I realized that no one had called my parents, I switched back from hoping for mercy to trying to execute justice. I said, Mom, this is what happened in gym class. I had to refuse to play because Mr. Nappo was cheating. He wasn't playing fair. I wanted justice. This wasn't right. First I wanted justice, then I wanted mercy, then I wanted justice again. It's messy, it's complicated. Now listen, that was gym class. This is real life we're living right now. And if we're going to trust God in this life, if he's going to be someone that we see as trustworthy, someone that we follow, then we're going to have to wrestle with justice and mercy. We will have to believe in his justice and in his mercy if we're going to follow him. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you 3 simple working definitions to help us understand the story we're looking at. And then I'm going to tell you the next part of this Abraham story. It's a bit long, so I'll read it, and it's in Genesis 18 and 19. And then after the story, I'm going to share with you 3 observations that come out of this story regarding matters of justice and mercy. So, first, 3 working definitions. And I have these up here. So, justice. In simplest terms, justice, you get what you deserve, right? An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Everyone's heard that phrase. I steal your cow, you get my cow in return. Sounds good, that's pretty fair. Now there's some immediate problems. Okay, you break something of mine and you replace it, that seems fair. But how do you find justice for some bigger offenses? How do you find justice for things like murder or something really terrible happens to you that you really can't replace all that easily? For something like a murder or losing a loved one because of something like that. Maybe capital punishment happens, right? That you might feel some vindication, but is there really justice done? You see the problem. It's hard to have kind of clean justice in our world, even though we might try as best we can. So justice, you get what you deserve. Mercy, you don't get what you deserve when you deserve something bad. Right? You get let off the hook when you do something where you should have gotten in trouble or punished or something like that. Now an obvious problem is it's hard to run a society on mercy. If you're giving out mercy all of the time, things won't work. No one will be held accountable, so there's some problems there. Even if you want to be merciful all the time, that you'll run into some problems. Third word, and I'll explain this more in the story, the third word is hospitality. I'm going to give you a working definition of this. Hospitality is treating others, especially the vulnerable or stranger, as you would want to be treated. Treating others, especially someone in a vulnerable position, as you would want to be treated. How we treat others is central to the faith, and it's central to issues of justice and mercy, and we're going to see that in this story. So we got it? 3 words we need to know. Justice, you get what you deserve. Mercy, you don't get what you deserve. Hospitality, you treat others, especially vulnerable people, how you want to be treated. All right, let's dive in. This is Genesis 18 and 19. And I'll be paraphrasing and walking through it and highlighting certain verses. So chapter 18 starts, Abe is sitting at the door of his tent in the heat of the day, and he sees 3 men approaching. So Abe's been pretty far along in this journey. He's been reaffirmed by God. He's still waiting for this child to come that God's promised him. And he's sitting there in the heat of the day, and he sees 3 people coming. One of them is the Lord. And we've seen the Lord kind of come down and approach Abe and talk to him before. And this is fascinating. A couple times in the Old Testament, God seems like he just shows up and talks with one of his followers, Abe or Moses or someone. So these 2 men, it's the Lord and then 2 other men who end up being angels, approach Abe. And Abe displays perfect hospitality. He greets them perfectly and wonderfully and cares for them. And this is a huge deal in their society. And these societies, in the Semitic cultures and in kind of ancient times to us, there were known codes of conduct regarding how you cared for travelers, how you cared for foreigners, how you cared for people who were passing through. Because these people were vulnerable, and society depended, and safety and security depended on these people being taken in and cared for well. They were being treated well. They were to be received the way you would receive family that's visiting. So Abe runs to meet them. He bows to them. He invites them in. He invites them to rest. He washes their feet. He goes out and grills a calf and gets them good bread, and he takes care of them. He loves the stranger. In this society, he has done the just and merciful thing. He's done exactly what he should do in caring for these people. The story continues in 9 to 16. The men come and deliver the message that Sarah's finally going to have a child. It's finally going to happen. They say, this time next year, you're going to have this kid that you've been longing for and hoping for and waiting for. This is great, great news. Sarah has a hard time believing this. Now, this is a huge, huge part of the Abraham story, but we're not focusing on it today. And we'll circle back and dive into it in one of the upcoming weeks. But they deliver this news that they're going to have this child. And after that, the men finish their time of refreshment. They spend this time with Abraham, and then they're about to go on their way. And Abe walks out with them. Abe kind of sees them out like a good host would, like when you see someone to your door at the end of a dinner party, or walk them out as they're going in their car. So, as they're on their way, the Lord begins contemplating out loud. He begins kind of just talking to himself a bit. He says, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do, or should I tell him?" Then the Lord says, "I've chosen him and his ancestors to be righteous and just." So he decides to let Abe into a conversation. He decides to let Abraham into what he's thinking. He lets Abe be a part of this. He says, "Abe, you see those two towns in the distance? You see Sodom and the town Gomorrah?" He said, "The outcry against them is great. Their sin is grave. It's so grave that I've heard their cries and I've come down to see." This is a serious moment. Abe knows what's going on. The Lord will send these two other angels to destroy the cities for their wickedness. Now, to complicate this matter, Abe's nephew Lot and his family live in Sodom. Earlier in the Abraham story, Lot accompanied Abe on his journey, but they parted ways a few chapters before this story takes place. And in fact, in one of the stories that we didn't talk about, Abe actually saves Lot and the whole city of Sodom from a neighboring city. There was these battles between these local cities, and Abe and his men went and bailed Lot out and took care of the city and actually saved Sodom from a lot of trouble. Now, so Lot is in this city, Sodom. He's kind of living as a resident alien. He's a foreigner living in this city. Now, what happens next is remarkable, and probably not the way we think about talking to God, but it's a remarkable story to see this in the Bible. Abe and the Lord have an honest conversation about what should be done next. Abe debates with God over matters of justice and mercy. And this is verse 23. So Abe's heard about what God's going to do. When Abe drew near and said, then Abraham drew near and said this, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it?" Verse 25. "Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just?" Now, Abe knows something that we know. He knows that when you go after the guilty, and we see this in our day and age all the time, when you go after the guilty, when you try to get the wicked, innocent people always get caught up in the crossfire. Right? We see that day after day in our world, in global events, in simple things and big things. You try to get the guilty, you try to get justice, but innocent people get caught up, innocent people get hurt, innocent people get killed. So Abe is suggesting something to God. He's suggesting perhaps the wicked should be spared for the sake of the righteous. Perhaps the righteousness of a few people is enough to save the entire city of wickedness. Instead of the multitude of the wicked ones being swept away, the whole city might be saved if you could find some righteous people to stand in on their behalf. So the Lord responds. He says, okay, Abe, if I find 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake. The Lord's willing to spare the city for the sake of 50 righteous men. Abe answered and said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord, I who am but dust and ashes. I like what he's doing here. He's sitting there. He knows what he's doing. He says, I know you're God, and I know I'm not. So I'm treading lightly here, God. But I'm wrestling with this, and so, Lord, I want to keep talking to you. Can we keep talking about this? Can I push this a little further? So he says, suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for the lack of 5 people? And the Lord said, okay, I won't destroy it if there's 45 people. Again, Abe speaks to the Lord and says, suppose 40 are found there. And it keeps going. The Lord says, I won't destroy it for the sake of 40. Well, how about 30? How about 20? And then he said one more time, he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak again, but this once more. Suppose 10 are found there. And the Lord answered, for the sake of 10, I will not destroy the whole city. Then the Lord went his way when he had finished speaking to Abraham, and then Abraham returned to his place. We move into chapter 19, and the scene shifts. So that scene ends, and now we're down at the city of Sodom. The 2 angels show up in the evening at the gates. Lot sees them. He greets them. He bows to them. He shows them hospitality, just like Abe had shown the 3 men hospitality in the scene before. And he says to them, my lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early and go on your way. The 2 men say, no, we'll spend the night in the town square. Lot knows that's going to be a problem. He knows this town's pretty wicked. So he says, no. He presses them strongly, the scriptures say. So they turned aside to him, and they entered his house, and he made them a feast. So he's gathered the men with him. He's showing them hospitality. They're having this feast. And before they lay down to the bed, before they all lay down to go to sleep for the night, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man surround the house. The text is trying to make a point that they haven't found 10 righteous people. Young and old, all the men to the last person. And they call to Lot while he's in his house. Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may know them. Now, this is a common euphemism in the scriptures. To know someone is a sexual relationship, and usually in the scriptures. So he's saying, they're saying, bring these people out to them. We want to sexually assault these angels. So Lot went out to the men at the entrance. He shut the door and he said, I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. And he said, behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. Now, I said this is a really messy story. You probably aren't thinking Lot is a great guy right now in this story either. He's offering kind of his daughters up as protection for these men. This is a messy, ugly, like nothing good is happening in this scene right now. But this is showing one kind of important thing. It's showing how essential it was to show hospitality to the stranger, even if it meant your own family getting damaged or hurt. It was so critical that you would protect the foreigner, that you would protect the person hurt, that you would protect the vulnerable, even at the expense of your own family. There's a great movie that came out recently called The Lone Survivor. And it's a story about, I believe it's a story about the Taliban and an American soldier that gets kind of caught up in the battle for Al-Qaeda. And there's a village that takes in this soldier, and they protect him because of hospitality laws while Al-Qaeda's attacking them. Has anyone seen that film? Yeah. That's like how important those laws are. You protect the vulnerable, you protect the stranger, you take them in, even if it hurts your family or other people in your village. So that's what it's showing you. So the men of Sodom respond to Lot. This fellow is a foreigner, and he has become the judge Now we'll deal worse with you than with them. And they're beating down the door, and they're trying to fight to come in and just attack Lot and his family and these angels. And then the angels act. They reach out of the door, they grab Lot, they pull him in, they slam the door shut, and then they strike the men with blindness. Then the angels grab Lot and they say to him, listen, we're about to destroy this place, because the outcry against his people has become so great before the Lord. The Lord has heard the outcry of people crying out for justice against these wicked people. The angels seized Lot and his wife and the 2 daughters by the hand, and they bring them outside the city to get them safe. And then the Lord rains down sulfur and fire from out of the heavens onto Sodom and Gomorrah. And he overthrows those cities, the valley, and all the inhabitants of the cities. And then Abraham sees all that's happened, and we see that Lot is protected for the sake of Abraham. And Lot is shown mercy, and his family is shown mercy. So that's the story. I told you it'd be messy. We don't hear a lot of sermons about this scene in the Bible because it's a rough one. It's kind of a challenging one. It's an important one if we're going to walk through the life of Abraham. And it's an important one to help us see more about the justice and mercy of God and to wrestle with those things. And I think as the Christian community, we're called to wrestle with the stories we see in the Scriptures and talk about them and seek to understand them and learn more and know more. So I have 3 observations. And 3 observations about putting our faith in this God and how it can help us overcome fear. First observation, you can talk to God. You can talk to God about anything. You can wrestle with what's going on in your world and in this world. Life is messy, but you can be honest and always tell God what you are thinking. He can handle it. You might think, okay, he's God. He's so big. How dare I ask questions? Abe felt some of that, but he talked anyway. God invited him in. He let him speak to him. And he let God tell him that he didn't understand. He let God challenge and ask questions and wonder about righteousness and justice and mercy. He listens. In this story, we see and notice a God who listens. He listens in this story. He hears the cries of injustice, and he cares so much that he comes down to see for himself. He listens to his friend Abraham. He is a God who hears. And when we as a community, when we as a people, when each of us as individuals choose to trust God, we're trusting a God who listens to us. We're trusting a God who hears us. And then we're invited to speak to him and tell him what's going on. If you want to grow in faith, if we want to grow in faith that overcomes fears, 2 things we can always be doing: praying and reading the Scriptures. I'm sure you've heard that before. I'm probably going to say it again today and next week. But do this. Do this as you read the Scriptures and as you pray. Practice radical honesty with God. If you've been a Christian for any length of time, you might read the Bible because you know you're supposed to or something like that. But every time you open the Bible up, you can read it and choose to be radically honest and completely honest with God and what you're feeling and thinking. You can read the Scriptures and say, I'm wrestling with this. This is difficult. Or God, I want to actually know you more. I'm not just doing this because I'm supposed to, or that's what Christians are supposed to do, or this isn't some academic exercise. I'm reading this seeking to know you. And while you're reading, you can be praying and saying, God, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm going through. I thank you that you hear me, that you listen. And we can bring those together daily. It's one of the reasons we're so excited about Branch Together. The idea that we want to read the Scriptures together regularly, Monday through Friday, and then actually talk about them. Because if we do something like that, if all of us are doing that and being honest, the result will be we will get to know God better. We'll have a stronger faith in him. It will help us overcome our fears. It'll help us know God better, know ourselves better, and know one another better. If we're willing to be honest and open and trusting and totally radically honest with God in our prayer life and as we read the Scriptures. So that's one. He listens, and we can be honest with him about what we're feeling, whatever it is, whenever we're feeling it. I don't think we'll get anywhere with God and faith and trust in any relationship if we're not willing to grow in being honest about what we actually feel and what we're actually experiencing. And I'm so thankful for Abraham in this story because he's just so blunt and honest with God about what he's feeling. So that's one. Two is trust God in ultimate matters of justice and mercy. Abe is really honest with God about what he's feeling, but ultimately, Abe is not qualified to make just and merciful decisions. He isn't as qualified as God. Humans aren't qualified for ultimate issues of justice and mercy. We don't have the right vantage point. If you think about it, we as humans can't usually come to agreement about what the just thing to do is or what the merciful thing to do is. Look at our political scene, right? Look at most government and political scenes. There's always 2 or 3 parties debating and fighting about the right way to make a just society or the right way to make a merciful society. What's just and what's merciful and what's kind and what's good. They can never agree. If you think about our own Supreme Court decisions, right? These are the best 9 judges in the land, theoretically, right? The people that have raised up to be the most faithful judges in our whole government system. How many votes did they have that go 5-4? How many times are they disagreeing? Humans can't agree on just things and what is just. Some of us look at this story and think, see, this is my problem with God. He destroys this whole village. He's so wrathful. Others might look at this story and think the opposite and think, how come Lot gets off free here? Lot looked like a horrible person in this story, willing to offer up his daughters. It depends on our vantage point. Our governments can't execute fair justice all the time. Our United Nations, kind of our global community, can't seem to figure out what the right things to do are. Our legal systems, as good as they're trying to be, they can't do it. And here's the problem. They're all kind of hopelessly flawed in one key way. And justice and mercy are really complex. At the end of the day, it's people, as individuals and in groups, who are trying to make these just and merciful decisions. These courts, these law enforcers, they're all made of people. And the evil that we're out there trying to assess, right? We see evil, we see wrong, we're trying to be kind, we're trying to be merciful. And we see all these issues around us out in the world, right? And we see all this evil, and we're trying to judge it, and we're trying to assess it. But the one huge problem is the evil that we're trying to fairly judge is also the evil that's inside of us. I don't understand my own heart well. I fail. I fail to be just. I fail to be merciful. I'm prone to cheat and cut corners. I have my own biases, my own preferences. I might be super merciful to someone just because I like them. I might be unfairly harsh because I don't like someone, or because I've had a bad day or didn't sleep well, right? Here's what the first followers of Jesus understood well and what they believed. And this comes from Romans 3. And they figured out the problem. This is the problem with trying to execute justice and mercy as humans. This is Romans 3, a letter Paul wrote to a church in Rome. No one is righteous. No, not one. Abe was never going to win his argument with God. He wasn't going to find 10 righteous men. No one is righteous. No, not one. No one understands. All of us have turned aside. No one does good, not even one. Our throat is like an open grave. We use our tongues to deceive. Have you ever used your words to deceive somebody? Then should you be judging others? Do you want deceitful people judging you? No. We long for justice and mercy, but fundamentally we can't trust ourselves or one another to execute real justice and real mercy. So what do? Well, here's why we can trust God with matters of justice and mercy. Here's why I trust God with matters of ultimate justice and ultimate mercy. Even when I don't understand the evil that's going on in this world, even when I don't understand the evil going on in my own heart, here's why I trust God. It's because I believe that justice and mercy come together perfectly and completely in Jesus Christ. This world, this whole world's mess, God hears it. And he comes down not just for a moment to see the wickedness, like in the story of Sodom, but God comes down and becomes a man. He lives with us. He neighbors us. He listens to us. He sees the injustice. He sees the evil. He sees the hatred. He sees the love. He sees the cries. He sees the heart of humanity. And he sees all this brokenness and all this injustice and all what the Bible calls sin that kind of ensnares us and gets at us in this life. He sees it all. And instead of raining down the fire and the sulfur on the wicked, which gives a measure of complicated, messy justice, but doesn't solve the problem, right? Sodom being destroyed didn't solve the problem. It didn't end evil in the world. Evil kept going. But instead of doing that, instead of bringing out just a measure of justice, he takes the fire upon himself on the cross. When Abe saw that the Lord was going to destroy Sodom, Abe said, "Sweeping away the righteous with the wicked, far be it from you, Lord, to do such a thing." But here is what the Lord does in Jesus. He sweeps away the one righteous man for the sake of all the wicked. The just one is judged in our place. God gives the righteous as a sacrifice for all of us and all of our wickedness. He's the God who can do whatever he pleases. He's the God who made heaven and earth. And that is how he has decided to deal with ultimate matters of justice and mercy. He has made Christ, and Christ has offered to pay the price for the sins of the whole world, for the evil of the whole world. And in exchange for that, we are given mercy. Humanity is offered total, full mercy. He is in the best place to work out justice and mercy, and that is the choice that he freely made for us. And this is the great news for all of humanity. This is why churches are called into being, to be a part of sharing this great news and working towards the world knowing this great, great news. That there is a just one, there is a merciful one, and he has paid the price for this world so that we can receive his mercy and have a relationship again with him. Here is how it's explained in the first Christian communities, and this is from a letter to Ephesus that Paul, the man who wrote Romans, wrote. It says this, Ephesians 2, "We were dead in our trespasses and sin, but God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead, made us alive together with Christ. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your doing, it is the gift of God." This is the starting point for the Christian community for thinking about justice and mercy. Abe didn't have the full picture that day. He didn't fully understand, but he continued to trust God. We have a bigger picture, and this picture calls us not to be afraid, but to trust the Lord with justice and with mercy. As we look at this world and see unjust things, as we look at this world and see mercy askew and broken, we can continue to trust God and pin our hopes on Jesus, knowing that ultimate justice and ultimate mercy come together in him. And that's what we have to wrestle with and come back to as our community grows. Will God be our starting point for matters of justice and mercy? Will we constantly come back to Jesus and say, all right, this is wrong in the world, this is broken, this is what I'm hurting with, this is what I don't understand, but I know God is ultimate justice. I know in Christ there's ultimate mercy. And I need that to transform how I think and how I act and how we live as a community. Now, when we do that, we trust God with matters of mercy and justice. Out of that then, only when we have that as our starting point, we are then called to do our very best as a church and as a people of God to do justly in this world, to love mercy in this world, and walk humbly with God. We seek to do justly and to love mercy. And we pray that God's kingdom would come and that his will would be done, and that out of our belief in who Jesus is, we seek to act as just and merciful people. And that brings me to kind of this third observation. Because there's one critical thing to do to be a just and merciful people. We must do this. We must do this no matter what. So while we're talking life out with God, while we don't understand but we know he's listening and we're talking to him, while we're remembering that ultimate justice and mercy come together in Jesus, and he's been our ultimate merciful sacrifice, while we're doing that, we're called to do one thing no matter what. And that's what Abe and Lot do in this story. We're called to show hospitality. We're called to treat others, especially especially the vulnerable in our world, as we want to be treated. If you read through the scriptures, you'll see something over and over again. God really, really, really cares about how people are treated. He really, really, really cares about how the vulnerable are treated, how strangers, how foreigners, how the weak are treated. Sodom's wickedness was laid bare in how they treated outsiders, how they treated the strangers they found at the gate. Now, this is the kind of the time, or when we look at a story like this, sometimes we say, yeah, but that was kind of early in the Bible, right? That was when there were some crazy scenes early in the Bible, and a lot of bad things happened. But Jesus, that's the fun stuff. That's the really nice stuff. Jesus is so kind, and little children come to him, and it's all rainbows and sunshine with Jesus. If you look at the stories of Jesus, you'll see something. You'll see just what you see in the God that we meet in the Old Testament. You'll see something very similar. Jesus really cares about how people are treated. He really cares. See, he knows his Father has shown this world ultimate hospitality. And he knows he has paid the price so that everyone can receive his mercy. And he knows how evil it is to receive mercy and grace and kindness, and then to go out and oppress the weak. Jesus tells story after story after story about people who are given good things. People who are shown grace and mercy and hospitality. People who are given banquets. People who are given wonderful, beautiful vineyards to care for. People who are given forgiveness of huge debts. He tells story after story of these, where people who've received some good gift turn around and oppress the weaker person. Turn around and attack the weak. Turn around and don't show hospitality and grace. They're shown something big and wonderful. Something wonderful, like a great king, like a picture of God's love towards them. And then they turn around to their fellow man, or they see someone who's in a weaker position, in a vulnerable position, and they oppress them and hurt them. And it's in those stories, if you read to the end of those stories, where Jesus sounds just like the judgment in Sodom and Gomorrah. Where there's fire and there's brimstone and there's judgment. And it's time and time again when people have been receiving something good from a great king or something so huge like it's from God himself, and then turn around and oppress the weaker person. There's this terrifying and also beautiful story in Matthew 25, towards the end of the book of Matthew, where Jesus has gathered all the people of all the nations together, and there's kind of this line drawn between the sheep and the goats. And on one side he says, you come, enter the kingdom, find peace and find rest. And he says, for I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison and you visited me. I was a stranger and you welcomed me in. And the people looked at Jesus and said, we don't remember that. When did we see you? I don't remember seeing you in prison. I don't remember seeing you being a stranger, Jesus. When did that happen? He said, whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done to me. And then he took the people on the other side, he said, away with you, and they banished them. He said, I was in prison, you didn't visit me. I was naked, you didn't clothe me. I was thirsty, you didn't give me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you didn't welcome me. And he said, Jesus, we didn't see you. How are we supposed to know it was you? And he said the same thing. He said, whatever you didn't do to the least of these, you've done to me. His simple answer was how we treat folks on the margins is how we are treating Jesus. We can't leave today thinking, all right, this is great. I can talk to God about whatever I want, which is true. We can talk to God, tell him what's on our heart, tell him what we're wrestling with. I should trust him with justice and mercy. I believe in Jesus, so I have the right answer in my head. And one day we'll get around to loving people. One day we'll get around to figuring out how to make sure we show hospitality to others. No. Our faith is always rooted in our actions, and our actions always manifest what we actually believe. So if we trust God with matters of justice and mercy, then the next step will be that we will be and grow into a people of radical hospitality towards others, especially towards others who are vulnerable and others who are in need. If we believe that God has been merciful to us, if we actually believe that, then we show mercy to others. That's what the church is called to be. Okay, I've said a fair amount of things. Let me summarize quickly, and then we'll pray and we'll continue singing together. Be honest with God. I mean that for everyone. Wherever you are in faith, if you've known God for years, if you're not sure you believe this, whatever it is, tell God what's going on. If you feel far from him, tell him that. Be honest with God. He listens and he can handle it, and he wants to hear from you. He wants to hear what you think. If you're angry at him, you can tell him that. But be honest with God. That will be good for you. It will help your relationship with God. It will help your relationship with others. If we did that as a people, and if we did that in prayer and scripture, good things would happen here. Good things would happen in our lives. Maybe harder things, maybe more difficult things, maybe messier things, but ultimately good things, because we'd get to know God better. We'd be more honest with him. We'd be more honest with each other, and we would grow together as a people. While we're honest with God, trust this God with matters of justice and mercy. Remember, as best we can, in the best of our attempts, we totally fail still. We live in a world where justice and mercy are so broken, but the God that we know is ultimately just and merciful. And we should come back time and time again to who he is and what he's done for us. And that's our starting point for justice and mercy. Knowing that he has been judged and paid the just price for us, and we have been given mercy. And then out of that, while we're trusting, while we're coming back and reminding ourselves that he is just and merciful, we are called to be a people who show that mercy. We are to be a people that show hospitality to the stranger, to the brokenhearted, to those on the margins of society. If we did that, if the church, Branch Church, the church in Monmouth County, if we really lived that out and extended mercy to others, what would happen is that more people who are broken and hurting would come to believe in a just and merciful God. More people would see him. More people would know him. More people would find the love that they need in this world. Quite simply, more people would come to know God. And that would be good. And we would come to know him better. I'm going to pray. I'm going to invite you to pray with me. Lord, I'm reminded of the song we sang earlier, that you're a good Father, that you're perfect in all of your ways. Lord, we confess that it's really hard to see how you are perfect in all of your ways sometimes, that we see a world that's broken and hurting, that we see a world where unjust things happen, where people who are in need of mercy never find it, and we wrestle with that. Lord, I thank you for this story. I thank you for Abraham's honesty. I thank you for your willingness to listen to him. I pray that this story, though a messy one, would teach us some good things. Lord, help us reach out to you. Help us trust that you are listening. Help us by your Spirit come to pray to you regularly and honestly and openly and in all of our lives. Pray that we wouldn't continue to hold back areas of our lives or hide them, but be more honest with you. Be more honest with each other. Lord, I pray that we would continue to learn more about you as we read the scriptures together. I pray for the whole idea of Branch Together, that we'd be able to get that going soon. I thank you for all the work Darren's been putting into it. I pray that that would be an avenue for us to read together and speak together more about what it means to know you. Lord, help us trust that you are just and merciful. Always keep before us the work of your Son Jesus on the cross and his death and resurrection. And then, Lord, fill us and fill our hearts with your mercy so that we might be a merciful people. Help us show mercy to our neighbors, to our friends, to our enemies, to people who are hurting, to people who are lost. Help us figure out how to do that. Help us figure out how to do that intentionally as a community. Help us to figure out how to be a merciful people in our daily life, in our daily walk, always ready and always willing and always open to offer that hospitality to those in need. Lord, I pray that you're with our children this evening too, and that they're learning something good and growing in you. I thank you for all the kids you've brought into this community. God, just help us teach them who you are and how we speak to them and how we sing with them, and give us the strength and energy to faithfully share the scriptures with them and to pray with them and to guide them and to love them. I just pray that you would show our children your spirit too.